This is Hattie for Dummies. It's just an attempt to kind of go over Hattie's theories. When you read the book, it can be a little bit confusing. There's a lot in there, and people have taken Hattie's theories and applied them in a lot of different ways to mean a lot of different things. So sometimes it gets a little murky. So what this presentation is an attempt to kind of clarify what I think the main points are and how it's important to pull these out to apply to our teaching practices. You know, in education, there's tons of data out there. When you go to research things, you see all kinds. If you're doing a search, for example, online or on an educational database, you will bring in hundreds, maybe thousands of studies related to your topic. Some of them say, this is a wonderful thing to do, this makes a big difference, students learn so much, and others say, they didn't learn so much, it didn't work so well. So as educators, we make the assumption that we are all trying for the same thing. We are working our hearts out to help students learn in the best ways that we know how. We're just not real sure what that is. And so what Hattie did, well, look at what Hattie did. He was attempting to answer the question, what do we do with all this research? How do we make sense of it? How do we interpret it in a reasonable, rational way that comes up with a bottom line that we can do something with? In other words, how do we as teachers have the greatest positive impact on students? We want to focus on impact. Actually, there's a very good piece of information out there. 98% of everything we try to do in the classroom makes a positive difference. Very little that we do actually hurts a student. When we're trying, we are having usually always a positive effect. But the problem is we have limited time, we have limited strength, we have so much to do, so many hurdles to conquer. What do we do that has the greatest positive impact on students? Okay, so Hattie's work in visible teaching. What Hattie did was he followed a statistical procedure, a recognized statistical procedure that allows researchers to combine the data from different studies. In other words, he would take all the studies on, for example, group work or collaborative learning, and he would combine their data in a way that made the outcome look at the data from all of those studies rather than a single study to see what actually happened. The scope of his work, well, it keeps expanding, but at this moment, his original work actually had 800 meta-analyses that combined 50,000 individual studies involving 250 million students. He's looking worldwide. He's looking with a broad scale, trying to find out what's really out there. Hattie looked at something that we call effect size. It's also a statistical analysis. And if you get, you may have heard of p-values. P-values tell you that this was a real effect. It didn't happen because of a chance. It really was a real effect. Now, although that's important, what we are asking is how much of an effect. Okay, so it made a difference. How much of a difference? How powerful? How much change did that make? And to find that, you look at effect size. Again, it's a statistical procedure, and to make a little sense of it, the strength of the treatment, the strength of the effect from point 1 to point 2 is it's a positive effect. Anything that's above 0 is a positive effect, but it's a small effect. From point 3 to point 4, it's a medium effect. And over point 4, it's considered a strong effect or a large effect. And so if you average everything we do in education, it's about at a 0.04. So that kind of lets you know that we want to look at at this 0.04 upward because we are, let me say this differently, you are the cream of the crop. You are the master teachers. You are here trying to develop your skills, dedicating your time out of class, your extra time. You already have a job, but you want to be the best teachers possible. So if anyone's going to make a difference, you are going to make that difference. So what you want to focus on are those 0.4 up strategies that make a large positive difference in your students. Okay, the results, he identified and ranked by effect size 195 factors rated for achievement. And in the book that you were given, you can look at those 195 factors and see where they rank as far as effect size. And keep in mind that anything above 0 is a good thing. But 0.4 up is more, think of this way, 0.4, students are kind of going to do that anyway. They're going to grow, they're going to mature, they're going to be in class and pick up something. So from 0.3 to 0.4 is kind of what they're doing anyway. To make a big difference, we want to go 0.4 up. So here kind of shows you where things rank. The negative ones down here, you see there's very few. There's few things that we can do to hurt students. One immediate thing that comes to mind is classifying them. You know, these are our low students. These are our students who can't learn. These are our students who do not have the ability. Those things hurt students. But mostly when we go into a classroom with positive attitudes and we're working to help the achievement of all students, almost everything we do see is in this area here. Now, what makes a difference? The structure of schools and classes, the effect size is 0.1. You remember, that's pretty small. So, you know, whether it's open classroom, closed classroom, ability group, not ability group, all of that stuff, doesn't make much difference. The attributes of the students. So many studies have been done about gender, poverty, ethnicity, whether the students have breakfast, whether the students get sleep, whether the students come from divorced homes. All of these things are the attributes of the students. You can see it has a very small effect size. If we teach well, almost all students are going to learn well. Deep programs. Oh, well, legislators love deep programs. These are programs that focus on higher level learning, thinking programs. This is where you have your project-based learning, your problem-based learning. Unfortunately, we love those. But look at the effect size. Unless we have built in those high-impact strategies, it is not, for years I taught thematic instruction and spiraling curriculum. Those things are very, very good. But the effect size is not dynamite unless we build in those other factors that make it have the dynamite difference. Teaching and test taking and coaching in this environment where everything's about test taking, it has a almost medium effect size. So it's positive, but not terribly. So all of those things we're talking about are in this area. Positive, but not dynamite. We're going to look at, in the professional development that you're doing and in the kinds of things that we're looking at on these lectures, we want to look at these guys that really make a difference. Look up here at 0.126 to 0.130. Wow. Things that have that kind of an impact, it's like 2 extra years of schooling. It is like bumping them up from 3rd grade to 5th grade in achievement levels. So these are the things that we want to look at and see if there's any way we can put them in our classroom. What makes a dynamite difference? The quality of the teacher. Teacher credibility. Do students respect you? It It's not so much how smart you are, believe it or not. The teacher level of knowledge is important, but it's not what increases teacher credibility. It's whether you're fair. It's whether you're giving your best. It's whether students know they can depend on you. The effect size is 0.90. Very, very strong. Student-teacher relationships, that falls up there in teacher credibility. And again, the effect size is 0.72. Very, very strong. This is, students don't really have to like you if they think you're being fair, if they think you're being dependable, if they think that you are going to be there for them. Classroom management, effect size 0.52, in the strength area. Teacher expectation, effect size 0.43. Do you expect all students to learn? Do you know they're going to do well? And do you help them see that you know that? Hattie stresses this very much. Teacher clarity. If students don't know what quality looks like, they cannot achieve it. We're going to look at that a little more when in some of the other lessons. But you can see that's a very strong effect size. Students know before they do that what a quality product looks like. In an ideal classroom, students could grade their own work because they are so clear on what quality looks like that they could take that rubric and apply it to their own work and tell you where they need to improve. Okay, these are Hattie's golden rules for educators. When you look at the other film, you'll see these. My fundamental task is to evaluate the effect of my teaching on students' learning and achievement. In other words, he puts a strong emphasis on teachers doing self-reflection. Just as it's very strong for students to do self-assessment, it is also very strong for teachers to do self-assessment. The success and failure of my students' learning is about what I do and don't do. I am the change agent. When I do I've spent much of my career in teacher education, and my little student teachers will come to me and they'll say, "Oh, Dr. Allen, all of my students failed that unit." My job then is to help the student teacher understand that the students are not the ones who failed. That we need to go back and look at the teaching. I talk more about learning than about teaching. That says leaning. Trust me, it's supposed to be learning. I talk more about learning than about teaching. Teacher evaluation used to be they'd come in and say, "Oh, she did this, she did this, she did this, she did this, so obviously she's an excellent teacher." No. Whether or not the extent to which you are achieving mastery as a teaching is the extent to which students are learning in your classroom. I seek out feedback. Assessment is about my impact on learning. If you are sensitive about being evaluated, think of working on that. Feedback is the only way you can improve. We need someone else's eyes on our work to help us do the very best we can. Okay, know thy impact. I teach through dialogue, not monologue. This is that participatory style of teaching. I enjoy challenge and never retreat to doing my best. My job is to develop positive relationships in the classroom and in the staff room. Hattie talks a lot, and you will see this in the other movie that you watch, about your talking to other teachers. I think one of the most destructive things in teaching is when you go in the staff room and teachers are sitting around talking how awful this student is, or this student is, or this student is. Think about yourself as a change agent to go in and say, okay, how are we going to increase learning in this situation? How are we going to meet the needs of this student? How are we going to improve our teaching so that all students should learn? I inform everyone about the language and learning. I am passionate and promote growth. I think if you're doing these other things, that's going to show. You just can't hide it. Okay, so now let's look at those specific things that have high impact. Self-reported grades, student expectations. top of all factors measured, 1.44. When students are assessing their own work and setting their own goals, they soar in achievement. Formative assessment. When, again, they're trying to get feedback from themselves, when you also give them feedback, it helps them soar in achievement. The more feedback and the more focused that feedback is, the better students achieve. See, feedback comes right after that. Oops, sorry. Vocabulary programs. Now, there's another lesson in this series on vocabulary programs. So much of how we store knowledge is through language. And the broader your vocabulary, the more confident you are, then all of your literacy skills improve. And the way you store and retrieve knowledge improves. So although vocabulary can't be a standalone, and I hope that maybe you will look at this vocabulary lesson, because the way we teach vocabulary makes a huge difference. When it goes in from just a definition, which is in episodic memory, which you will learn, and goes into semantic memory, which means you know what that term means. You don't have to depend on a definition. You know intuitively. You don't have to give a definition when you see that word, because you know what it means. That's the power. And vocabulary programs that are focused on that kind of vocabulary learning have an extremely high effect size. Concept mapping. Again, as you look through the things that have high impacts, you will see things like metacognitive, organizing strategies, concept mapping is very high. All of these refer to a particular way of storing and retrieving memory, which is organizing that memory. When you have students organize their information, they store it and retrieve it very successfully. So these are easy things to put into your instruction, and they have a tremendous effect on the level at which students achieve. So I hope you will look at these, look at your classroom, and see how you can incorporate some of these to increase the mastery of your instruction. So, Hattie, in summary, what is high impact instruction? It's active and participatory. It's student-centered and student-driven. It's focused on thinking rather than task completion. And the level is determined by the student, not the curriculum. Hattie calls this the Goldilocks principle. Not too hard, not too soft, just right. So I hope this is helpful in helping you understand what Patty does, or what Hattie suggests. The learning task is clear. What success looks like is absolutely clear. There's extensive peer interaction and discussion. Success on the task brings a strong sense of success. This is where students go, yes! And student attitude is, let's do it again. Thank you. Oh, I'm not through yet. Whoa, don't go away. Hattie also has you look at what deep or foundational knowledge and deep conceptual understanding. Surface or foundational knowledge and deep conceptual understanding. There's a very strong chapter of that in your book. To understand that, I think of, go back to your Bloom's taxonomy. I know we've all visited Bloom's at some time in our teacher education, where you start with knowledge and you go up to application and all the way up to synthesis with the different levels of thinking. This is valid. This is important. And this is kind of what Hattie is referring to, this kind of understanding, the way of looking at knowledge. You have to have surface or foundational knowledge before you can have deep conceptual understanding. Some things you only need surface or foundational knowledge. For example, 3 times 3 is 9. You don't need to discuss it. You don't need to map it. You don't need to organize it. You just need to know it. However, the nature of a democracy, you can't memorize that. That's something that's deep conceptual understanding. So think of blending these things together. For example, vocabulary programs, lecturing, phonics instruction, mnemonics, all of these are strong in building surface or foundational knowledge. Classroom discussion, concept mapping, organizing and transforming class notes. Now, notice that taking class notes is not particularly powerful. It's helpful. But when you take those notes and have to organize them or discuss them with someone or put them in a drawing or put them in a graphic organizer, whoa, the power of those notes goes way up. And when you look at some of the other lectures when we talk about how the brain stores information, you'll see why that's true, because you organize that information. And so it is stored very strongly and can be retrieved very quickly. Now, what you need to do, and the chapter in your book helps you understand this, is decide, okay, is this knowledge, is this what I'm teaching, surface or foundational knowledge? That doesn't mean it's not important. Or is it deep conceptual knowledge, understanding? Because the way you teach it will be different depending on the level at which you need students to know it. Here's that old Bloom's taxonomy, and this is applying Hattie on top of Bloom's taxonomy. Down here, this is surface or foundational knowledge, and as you move up, you get to deep conceptual knowledge. Remember, think of this as foundational. No, you can't create if you don't have anything to draw from in order to create. You have no pieces and parts to put together. And so don't think that students don't need surface or foundational knowledge. It's just that the deep conceptual knowledge, when information needs to be learned at the deep conceptual level, then we need to move forward on that. Okay, now it's heavy in summary. Research supports participatory instruction when the goals are clear, the instruction is at students' unique levels, assessment is focused and often, and we're talking formative assessment. Summative assessment gives you grades that you can report to administrators and parents. It really doesn't do anything for students. It doesn't do anything for learning. When the focus is on learning and not on the activities. Thank you.